one great voice we have in a democracy, the voice of our vote.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been, and they are not now.
This idea that government is beholden to the people is still the most unique idea in all the long history of man.
Make sure that you get people in office who are going to be responsive to the needs of the individuals that they represent.
They're changing the rules. That's not right, that's not fair, and that is not just.
The National Guard has been called in to aid in the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, a city with a water supply contaminated with lead.
Thousands of residents exposed to toxic levels of rust, iron, and lead want to know who's to blame. Volunteers from across the state and country have trucked in water on U-Haul trucks because of the city's contaminated drinking water.
The entire population, roughly 100,000, was potentially exposed to lead.
The Flint water crisis really starts with the 2010 elections. In those elections, Republicans gained total control of the state government in Michigan. One of the things that they did was they passed what they called an emergency manager law. This law allowed the state government to effectively override local government and install their own executive to do practically whatever they wanted in terms of public policy.
Governor Snyder signed the new law giving financial managers broader powers to fix the finances of communities and school districts.
7 emergency financial managers are in place, including in cities like Detroit, Flint, and Pontiac.
These emergency managers were described as virtual dictators over their communities. They could impose spending cuts. They could re-bargain contracts.
They took control to keep control. If that meant taking democracy away, they decided that that would be the route they would take.
But we have to send the message that we will not tolerate emergency dictators in the land.
There was widespread grassroots opposition because it was so extreme.
We fought it. We fought it in protest. We fought it using our bodies.
Shame! 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 Shame!
We fought it at the ballot box.
In November 2012, by a pretty significant margin, voters rejected this extreme emergency manager law.
We were excited because grassroots won. Everyday people won and said, we don't want emergency management. And then, in the midnight hour, in lame duck session, the legislature found this loophole, changed some words, changed some commas, and created a new law. And then after they changed it, made sure that it could never be repealed again.
One of the first things that Republicans did when they took over the legislature was they drew these aggressive legislative districts that locked in Republican majorities.
The legislature never would have passed the Emergency Manager Act in Michigan if it had not been for gerrymandering. The people did not want this. They went to the ballot box and they made that clear in a referendum. But the legislature knew they were no longer accountable to the people. They knew that these district lines completely insulated them.
Here's the flag.
My office started getting phone calls. This water is horrible. It comes out of the tap brown. I'll never forget. One lady came up to me in a meeting and said, "Reverend, my dog won't drink this water."
This crisis began over a year ago, silently, when the city switched from a Detroit water system to the Flint River. The Flint River has a high salt content, so it corroded the pipes that it flowed through, and lead from those pipes leached into the system.
It happened because elected officials had the ability to do whatever they wanted to do. If I don't ever have to worry about being unelected, I don't care about your water. Why? Because I don't have to be accountable to you. Faith in government began to wane. Faith in democracy, faith in the whole process began to wane.
I think Flint woke people up. Just sitting and watching like these politicians just so blatantly disregard the will of the people. You have these officials who feel untouchable, who feel like they can't get unelected because they've designed and rigged a system to make it that way. I just reached a point where it was like, why aren't we, how can we do something about this? Like, how? I wanted to have some way to come together and start fixing this and stop accepting that things are corrupt. In this age of the internet, you're so connected to like these great examples of people who start off on something and it does work sometimes. And so I thought, you know, I'm gonna throw it out into the world. From the moment I posted it, I saw so many people who were just upset with the current way politics had been happening. I saw that there was a pent-up energy. I was like, I'm not alone. So I just thought I'd, try.
Where you draw the lines makes all the difference. A map maker knows as they draw a line how it's going to influence an election precisely.
The reason that you gerrymander is to make it harder for your opponent's vote to count. And there are a few different ways you do that. You can pack your opponents, so you can put your opponent's supporters into as few districts as possible. So they'll win some seats, but you'll win all the other seats. Then there's also cracking. That's the other way gerrymandering works, where you spread your opponents out. So fine, you'll give your opponents 20% of the vote in a bunch of districts, but they're never going to win those districts.
The effects of packing and cracking are to create seats that are safe. The winner is pre-decided just by the way that the districts are drawn.
It really represents legislators picking voters rather than voters picking legislators. And I think most people find that offensive.
The system is no longer working. The political system no longer works for the average person. And in Michigan, it no longer works for Michiganders. So for today, we're going to do a campaign highlight, kind of give everybody an update of what's happened over the last month. We wanted to do something about this issue, but to pretend that we knew at all what we were doing would be a complete lie.
I'm John Haneski. I'm heading up the Finance Committee.
I got pulled out a few weeks ago. I know Katie from college. We sat next to each other in public policy class.
And then I'm also the state field director, so I have that group also, which consists of...
There had been some news pieces saying that there was not interest from our elected officials in changing this.
The proposal at a glance is it's going to be a citizens commission.
And so it just felt like an independent, citizen-driven commission that would draw the lines in a fair and transparent way was the way to go.
You prescribe for fixing this Citizens Commission. 4 would be Democrats, 4 would be Republicans, 5 would be independents.
Yeah, so right now the process happens completely behind closed doors and is the most partisan thing that could happen. You have one party with lobbyists locking themselves behind, that door. Our process takes all of that and throws it out into the open.
Because I don't do politics for a job, it's not a huge part of my life. When we started talking to other groups, they were like, well, nobody in your group has, directly ran a ballot initiative, so.
I mean, are you going out and talking to groups, trying to get some big organizations who might have some financial resources behind them?
We're looking to coalition build. Redistricting is an issue that affects so many different things.
So who do you have on board?
No organizations formally yet, but we're working with plenty.
You're trying to coalition build. Who's in your coalition?
I think they didn't know what to do with us.
So this is part of the 14th Congressional District. So why was it created this way?
But we started doing these town halls.
Farmington has a good number of Republicans in it, so you pull Pontiac out and you put it in the next district over because there it contributes to majorities for the other side.
And we saw, a renewed sense of urgency from the people of Michigan.
We started from a Facebook post in social media and quickly turned into 1,000 different strangers from across the state that have come together to go through the process, learning as we go.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, the motion carries.
Yes, we have something very important for you to do.
I'm gonna cry. I'm shaking, thank you. Our whole campaign has been about the people, about representing accurately the voices of the people and making sure that what we actually want as change doesn't get manipulated from anybody. And I feel so confident that we have done that and will continue to do that. So thanks, and let's go gather petitions!
Gerrymandering takes its name from a man named Elbridge Gerry, the governor of Massachusetts in 1812, who agrees to maps that draw up wild districts. A political cartoonist takes one look at this and thinks it looks like a salamander, so it becomes known as gerrymandering.
Quick side note, you are not wrong to notice that the Jerry in gerrymander refers to a guy whose name was actually pronounced Gerry because literally everything about gerrymandering is stupid and wrong.
All the way through the mid to latter part of the 20th century, gerrymandering, though it was pervasive,
State legislatures all over America are at it again.
it was never used to consolidate and make permanent the power of any one political party.
gerrymandering continues to be an effective weapon to maintain the status quo.
It was often about incumbent protection, and both sides would do it. Democrats did a terrific job of gerrymandering California in the 1980s. There was a congressman named Phil Burton who used to say that the district lines that he drew there were his contribution to modern art.
The fact is, gerrymandering has become a national scandal. The Democratic-controlled state legislatures have so rigged the electoral process that the will of the people cannot be heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next First Family of the United States of America.
November 2008, you have the historic election of our first African-American president. You see a Democratic supermajority in the U.S. Senate, and it returns a Democratic majority to the U.S. House.
The defeat is total. Republican leaders just can't spin it any longer.
Barack Obama promised to change the red states blue, and he did. It is remarkable.
If you watch the news coverage of that night, folks were talking as if the Republican Party was dead for a generation. Not simply because of this election, but because of the way American demographics are changing.
I think Republicans saw the writing on the wall, which is there are fewer and fewer Republicans born every day and more Democrats every day. They're running out of room.
There's no question now the Republicans have got a lot of work to do.
Something is wrong with the Republican Party.
The damage is very severe. Our party is eroding by the day.
There's always that moment, right? Whenever there's a big loss for a party, there's this moment of panic. I think those of us who've been around a little bit kind of can see past the panic, but still have the fundamental strategic question: what are we going to do? How do we get back? And I think that, part of that turned out to be our Red Map project.
Chris Jankowski is one of the smartest minds in the Republican Party. He understands that as important as 2008 was, 2010 had the opportunity to be a much more important election. 2010 is a zero year. Elections ending in zero are more consequential because it's a census year, and we redistrict every state legislative seat and congressional seat following the census.
The census provides an estimate of how many people are in every state, in every county, and every block. As per the Constitution, in order to keep up with population shifts, they build new state and congressional districts.
In 80% of all states, it's the state legislatures that play the key role in redistricting.
If you win state legislatures in 2010, you get to draw the new maps that control all the elections over the next decade. And they knew that.
Jankowski goes to Republican donors and he says, I can deliver two things for you. I can deliver conservative control of Congress, perhaps for a decade, but I can also promise Republican control of the state legislatures, and we can move a conservative agenda through the states as well.
It was a very easy sell to those who were involved in state elections. What we did was we took the cost of swing congressional seats. There were 10 years, 5 elections, and we pegged that at over $100 million per election. We said, okay, for this price, we can get control of those state legislatures and redraw the maps. We projected it would be quite a cost-efficient endeavor, $25–30 million rather than almost $500 million.
If you look at the donors to this project, you see the big money interests that help fund the Republican Party and conservative politics in the country. Walmart, Altria, which is big tobacco, the Chamber of Commerce, establishment corporate interests like the Koch brothers. 2010 already was setting up to be a big year for the Republicans, but what they wanted to do was win the right seats. The key seats that would allow them to have an influence on the redistricting process.
It was Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Colorado. You know, in Michigan, I looked at their map, looked at their research and their plan, and I said, okay, we're in for $1 million. And they said, really? And I said, yep. So I want you to spread this map. Act like you've got another $1 million.
They spent tons and tons of money in races where people had never even seen TV ads before.
Senator Reynolds supports Obama's healthcare takeover.
$1 billion tax increase to fund more government spending.
Unemployment has almost doubled.
We looked and said, okay, it looks like crime's an issue here. This incumbent has bad crime votes, so we're going to educate them on that. You know, this is a bad budget vote. This is a bad school vote. We went wherever the data suggested we should go.
We had no idea what was about to hit us. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. In the last weeks of that campaign, mailers from my opponent were arriving every day.
Incumbent Senator Margaret Dixon. Who does she really care about?
Right at the end, there was a campaign ad against me that portrayed me, apparently, as a prostitute.
What does Margaret Dixon really care about?
I didn't really sense it in North Carolina until the very end, and I saw it in my race, and I saw it when I talked to colleagues. They were having the same experience. We all had kind of this aha moment. And it was true, it wasn't just North Carolina, it was true across the country.
It's shaping up as a big Republican night.
It is being called a GOP sweep and a Tea Party tidal wave.
We knew it was going to be a good night. The Friday before that, I went out on a limb and predicted we would pick up at least 10 legislative chambers and possibly higher. And right after I got off the phone with that reporter, I thought, oof, that seems, you know, I believe it, I see it in the data, but it just seems really amazing. But then as the night unfolded, we took everything we intended to take.
North Carolina House and Senate flipped to the Republicans for the first time since 1870. The Indiana House has flipped. The Pennsylvania House has flipped. Michigan House has flipped. The Ohio House has flipped. The Iowa House has flipped.
The tsunami just hit the heartland.
This was actually something that wasn't covered a whole lot at the time. A dozen or so states would turn into Republican hands and would now have control over drawing all of the district boundaries.
They did this for $30 million. It's the biggest bargain and perhaps the biggest heist in modern American political history.
For us, it was mission accomplished. And then the second part of the plan was what happened with redrawing lines. We sent out a letter to all the new leaders and said, if you need resources, we would be happy to provide those for you.
They say, if you need mapping help, if you need legal help, you let us know, we've got the money for you. We have the experts, we have the money, let us help.
Tom Hoffler is kind of a superstar in gerrymandering.
It's my job to advise Republican stakeholders in the redistricting question on how they can maneuver through these thickets.
He goes around and works for Republican legislators in multiple states and will draw their maps.
There's something almost like an old country doctor about Hoffler, that he'd pack his old kit bag, you know, with his laptop, kiss his wife in Alexandria, Virginia, goodbye, and pet his dog, and then set off into a country that was about to be redrawn by him.
Redistricting used to be done by legislators or their legislative staff, so it was always a partisan project, but at least people lived in the state, and they knew the people, and they knew the politics. These people out of Washington, all they know is where the airport is when they come down and deliver the plans. And they also know how to use sophisticated software to maximize political results.
Hoffler's got a piece of software, and he downloads a bunch of political data into that, and he spits out the most partisan map that he thinks the courts will allow.
Gerrymandering from 1788 through 2000 is in its minor leagues. In 2010, gerrymandering jumps straight into its steroids era. Big data and big technology emerge in such a way that you can carve more precise gerrymanders than ever.
They used census data, educational levels, income levels.
Voters' partisan history, their race and their gender and their age, those factors tell you so much about a voter that you can predict how they're going to vote in a few years with a strong degree of confidence.
They could go down a street and these people are Republicans, we're going to put them in this district. These people are Democrats, we're going to put them over here. There was no transparency at all because they were using private computers. They were being drawn off-site by hired Republican consultants.
Picture a black box. Whatever happens inside that black box, you can't see. They just come out and they say, here's the map.
It was a flawlessly functioning map. Every single district hit what you might call the sweet spot, safe enough for Republicans to consistently win it, but it didn't waste excess votes that they could have spread around to other districts. On the other hand, the few Democratic districts they drew were designed to quarantine as many Democratic voters as possible.
So here's what they do. They get data on where all the African Americans live, and then they just draw lines around it. So the really crazy looking maps, the really squiggly looking ones, the reason they're squiggly is because they're picking up all the African American communities all throughout the state.
Take a look at North Carolina's congressional map. Look at District 12. It's so weirdly shaped, they can't even fit the 12 in it. Looks like a Rorschach test. What do you see in this shape? I don't know, it's either a dragon or 300 years of institutional racism.
Republicans have cynically put more and more minorities into what's called majority-minority districts. So the district goes from 50% minority to 60% minority to 70% minority. And the reason they're doing this is so that minorities will have less impact in all of the other districts. And that was exactly the strategy that Tom Hoffler used in North Carolina, funneling as many black voters as possible into the 1st and 12th congressional districts while bleaching the surrounding areas.
The truth is, the Republicans targeted African Americans, but the motivation wasn't, we want to hurt African Americans, it was, we want to hurt Democrats.
One of Hoffler's crowning achievements is what he did in the western part of North Carolina. In particular, the district that was occupied at the time by a moderate Democrat, Heath Shuler.
Heath Shuler was a former University of Tennessee quarterback.
I know you're mad at
He was
Congress,
kind of a moderate to conservative Democrat.
You didn't send me up there to blindly follow any one party. You sent me up there to do what's right for our mountain families.
He loved guns, he was anti-abortion. He was the very picture of a good old boy. And so you can't really run against this guy like he's the San Francisco Democrat. So they had to change the guy's district. The most Democratic area of the district was Asheville, which is this little Haight-Ashbury in the middle of the mountains.
Hoffler just essentially carved Asheville out of that map and moved it to another area, an area that was so Republican that it could absorb Asheville. Suddenly, that part of Buncombe County where Asheville was a part was suddenly quite a conservative district. Heath Shuler, recognizing the writing on the wall, retires from politics altogether. It suddenly now is there for the taking by Republicans, and the guy who wins it is a guy named Mark Meadows.
2012 is the time that we're going to send Mr. Obama home to Kenya or wherever it is. We're going to do it.
Meadows is now the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, which is the hardline group in the House of Representatives that opposes anything that is not orthodox, conservatism.
Replacement of people like Schuler with people like Meadows is actually one of the reasons why the country as a whole has become so hyperpartisan. Candidates in the middle, both moderate Republicans and conservative Democrats, they've been the key targets. It moves our political system towards polarization.
When a member of Congress need only fear a primary challenge, when they are so safe in their seat that they cannot actually lose an election, all they care about is guarding their base. So working across the aisle, compromise, trying to find common ground, all of the things we used to think of as being central to the art of politics actually become the only things that can cost them their seat.
These are all shrink wrapped in packages of 100, and so are the petitions. So I'm just going to make sure that you have 19. Yeah, they do. Then it's only for people who signed. People who don't sign don't get anything.
Yeah, they don't.
So that's where we're headed.
Are you guys registered to vote in Michigan?
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you a registered voter here in Michigan?
Have you had a chance to sign the petition to end gerrymandering in Michigan?
And what? Would you be interested in signing a petition against gerrymandering? Against what's that? Gerrymandering.
In Michigan, it is almost impossible for a petition drive to gather enough signatures without using paid professional petition circulators.
You're not paying for names.
Correct.
And you don't intend to.
Correct, yeah. Right now, we're at 2 weeks in, officially today. We have 50,000 signatures that have been gathered, 100% by volunteers from across the state.
We're working with voters, not politicians, for the anti-gerrymandering drive.
Because right now, politicians are manipulating the system, so then they don't listen to voters.
Hi, this is Katie. I'm doing a super late weekly update. I just wanted to say thank you to every single person who decided to start gathering signatures.
So I would start with today's date.
The anti-fracking movement had a lot of energy, and they failed to get the signatures needed to get on the ballot.
You know about the topic?
Oh,
no,
yeah.
So, okay, wonderful.
I mean, the only group ever to manage getting a petition on the ballot using only volunteers was Right to Life.
If anyone else is interested in signing.
I'm not sure if anyone has been paying attention at all to our ticker, but we are at 196,000 signatures, which is absolutely amazing.
They're not only on pace to get the 400,000 that they want, but it looks like they're going to do it before their deadline, which is really amazing. I tell you, these folks are everywhere. I mean, I can't go to a public event without seeing them.
Oh my gosh, remember right after we got approval where they called all our people old ladies who aren't gonna get anything done? They're like, their minds are blown. It's awesome. Oh, goodbye, Taylor. Oh, I wish I was better at this.
It's pretty bad.
Not as much as I do.
Today we turn in our signatures to the Secretary of State. Who would have known that a little over a year ago we would be here today, turning them in 2 months early with all volunteers. In under 40 days, we got all 83 counties represented, and that is only possible because all of you guys decided to say, heck yeah, I'm gonna join on to this thing. Here's where we're loading up the petitions. I'm not sure if everybody can see this, but there are literally rows and rows of boxes.
I remember the first time I saw this group get together and talk about it. And, I'm a veteran political reporter, I'll have you know. And I looked at these people and I was like, no way. No way. I know what a winning operation looks like, and this isn't it.
They have turned every political operative's predictions on their head. They have really blown the box up, and there is no more box. They have reinvented everything.
Our proposal will take redistricting out of the hands of politicians and lobbyists who do their work behind closed doors and give it to citizens who will do it in the public. What we've seen in other states who have done redistricting efforts similar to ours is you see higher voter turnout. There's about 13 different states that have independent commissions.
Yeah. So it is a really full process.
Thousands of people have worked on this campaign. If we can get this passed in 2018, there will be thousands of people who affected law that will affect every election in Michigan. It was for and by the people. And I know that's like kind of hokey and kind of like, really founding fathers-y, but like the fact that we would actually be able to do that and prove that democracy is still out there, that's amazing.
No matter what you do for this campaign, entering the check numbers, like it all is only possible because of each of you. And I know, at least on my end, that's the best part about this campaign, is seeing that really the political power is inherent in the people. So, yeah.
The one thing that we are sure of is that legislators will fight like crazy to retain this power they have. I think there will be a vicious fight by the people who are in power to preserve that power.
They're going to want to try to find some way to litigate us to keep us off from the ballot. We are not going to outspend our opposition. We might get lucky and get outspent 4-1. We're probably going to get outspent 10 to 20 to 1. The opposition is going to try to bleed us dry financially. And then they're going to go for the PR. They're going to be saying that we are complex, that we are complicated, and that we're confusing. We cannot make our policy sound even a little bit complex, confusing at all. Like, we have to make sure it's a very simple and direct approach, and that the language that we use to describe the policy reflects that.
And I think,
They're absolutely worried about us. They know and we know that once this gets on the ballot, it almost always passes.
The election of 2010 had been the Tea Party wave. And the redistricting that followed the election of 2010 would keep those legislators in their seats. In a normal political cycle, we would expect a wave to come in and the wave to recede, and a wave to come in and the wave to recede. We see this over and over again. The election of 2010 was a giant wave. And the Republican Party put up an enormous seawall in order to stop that wave from receding. And when that happened, we have seen extreme policy as a result.
Wisconsin is basically an evenly divided state. Half of the state is Republican and half of the state is Democratic. In 2010, Project Red Map and the Republicans invested a large amount of very strategically targeted money. They took the state assembly and the state senate, and they won the governorship.
No matter where you live, no matter what your background, no matter who you voted for, we all live in Wisconsin together, and we're going to move this state forward together.
Scott Walker just swept in with the rest of the Republicans. I mean, the slate went from everything Democratic to everything Republican. Everything.
Red Map for us was only the beginning. State governments like Wisconsin were little laboratories of democracy. Now that we got control of them, we wanted to do something with it.
Good morning. See, everyone's here to see my prediction for the Ohio State-Wisconsin game on Saturday. In this bill will be a change in terms of state employees
not being required to be a part of their union. And
Act 10 would essentially do away with collective bargaining for public sector employees. That was something that had been a long tradition in Wisconsin, had been a cherished part of the state. That was a total surprise.
This is a significant change. This is obviously a very bold and aggressive change.
The Republicans, they understood, Scott Walker understood, that public sector unions, the teachers, the municipal workers, the folks who pick up your garbage, they tend to vote Democratic, and they use their unions as a means of promoting their political views.
Thanks very much for your time.
So he wanted to destroy that.
I knew what this would mean. It came up in caucus, and I think my exact words were, "Are you crazy? People kill each other's dogs over this kind of stuff."
When Act 10 was introduced, the entire state just rose up in anger.
First there was 10,000, then there was 20,000, then there were 30,000, and this thing just sparked.
Tens of thousands of people in the Capitol. As many as 100,000 on the Capitol grounds some days, and this thing is sustained for days and days and weeks and weeks.
It's just hard to express how angry people were. You know, this is a place like Minnesota. People are basically nice. And suddenly we had this incredible polarized atmosphere.
We were a state that had a strong tradition of trade unions. People thought, what in the world is he trying to do?
Hi, this is Scott Walker.
Scott, David Koch, how are you?
Hey, David. I'm good. And yourself?
I'm very well. I'm a little disheartened by the situation there, but what's the latest?
We're actually hanging pretty tough. I mean, you know, amazingly, there's a much smaller group of protesters, almost all of whom are in from other states today. Five to 6,000 state workers will get at-risk notices for layoffs. We might ratchet that up a little bit, Bill.
Beautiful, beautiful. Got to crush that union.
Just as there were all these protesters begging this governor to listen to them, the person who he was willing to listen to and so eager to please was an out-of-state billionaire.
He talked about coordinating with other governors, which made it very clear that this is a national plan.
I talk to Kasich every day. You know, John's got to stand firm in Ohio. I think we can do the same thing with Rick Scott in Florida. I think Snyder, if he got a little more support, probably could do that in Michigan.
This was a test run to see if they could run over public employee unions nationwide.
There's a lot of us new governors who got elected to do something big.
You're the first domino.
Yep. This is our moment.
Republicans had no fear of losing power because they could draw districts to insulate themselves from public opinion.
The leadership of the Republican Party in both the House and the Senate in Wisconsin are able to tell their members, it's okay to vote for this. It might not be popular, stay strong. We are drawing you a seat you cannot lose.
While the streets were full of people demonstrating, hundreds of thousands of people, what we didn't know was that Scott Walker and the legislature took the computers that they were going to use to redistrict out of the Capitol building, and they moved them across the street to a Republican law firm by the name of Michael Best and Friedrich. And in the very back of that law firm, they set up a secret mapping room.
It's an incredibly powerful and jarring juxtaposition. We have these two things playing out. There's all these people protesting the anti-union legislation. Right across the street, key aides to the legislature are writing in secret the redistricting maps that will determine Republicans' power for the next decade.
Knowing that they had both houses of the legislature, they did everything they could to hide their map drawing process, not only from the public, but even from most Republicans.
Nobody could even come into the room unless you signed a secrecy agreement. And if you signed that secrecy agreement and you managed to get into the room, which you could only do if you were Republican, you were only allowed to see your own map.
So you have before you the various maps, and we have some other members of the legislature here, and we're open to questions.
When we first see the maps, it's obvious that there's some significant bias in them. Some individual legislators had been drawn into competing districts that were going to be much tougher for them to win in. There were these districts that were drawn to pull Democratic voters into suburban districts so there'd be fewer Democratic districts. And there were clearly some districts that were going to be less competitive.
It was very well calculated. They knew exactly what they were doing.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
When the results were known on election night and we had been killed in the election, somebody said, well, don't worry, all is not lost. The Republicans won 60 seats in the assembly. I said to myself, and I said audibly to the people I was with, well, that can't be right. There's a mistake here somewhere. And it was at that point I began to realize that things had changed.
You have several states in 2012 where Democratic candidates actually won more votes statewide than Republicans did, but Republicans would win lopsided majorities. You had Pennsylvania where Democrats won more votes and Republicans walked away with a 13-5 advantage. Michigan where Democrats won more votes and Republicans had a 9-5 advantage. North Carolina, Wisconsin, all of these states at either the congressional or legislative level saw Democratic candidates win more votes statewide, but Republicans win a majority of seats.
Republicans could not be beaten, and they were not beaten even when their side got many fewer votes. And what you immediately see in all of these gerrymandered states is the rapid movement of a very conservative agenda through state legislatures.
A new bill being considered in Wisconsin would allow local school districts to make sex education and teaching contraception optional.
Republicans here called a special session to pass House Bill 2, more commonly known as the bathroom bill.
A recent move by the legislature removes one route to recourse in wage disputes.
It started the moment the General Assembly went into session.
We're on the 10th order of business, second reading of amendments and Senate bill.
A legislative blitzkrieg would be the way I would describe it.
There was anti-regulation, anti-environment.
The clerk will close the roll. Assembly Amendment 3 is adopted.
Defund public schools.
Disabling and going after Planned Parenthood.
Concealed carry was another issue that they fought for a long time. Democratic governor would veto it. They were able to put that through.
Another gun rights bill is on the table to protect drivers who carry their firearms inside their vehicles and go to work.
If you wonder why do we see representatives that are doing things that their constituents don't want, why are laws being passed that don't seem to reflect the wishes of the public, gerrymandering is a big part of the explanation.
One legislator stood on the floor and said, we are now in power and we're going to exercise that power and you all can sit back and forget about it.
People began wondering, where are all of these laws coming from? The fact that Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, they're all passing virtually identical pieces of legislation. That's not a coincidence. Someone's behind this.
ALEC stands for the American Legislative Exchange Council, and the goal of ALEC is to push out policies to maximize corporate profits at the state level. This has been a goal of the right for decades.
This is a shadow arm of the Republican Party. You had corporations literally writing bills in conjunction with state legislators, and then state legislators introducing those bills to become law.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
A developing story, a voter ID bill in Wisconsin is moving on to the full assembly.
The measure would require voters to show their IDs at the polls.
I first became aware of ALEC after the 2010 election, when we began to see all of these new voter ID laws. And it was clear that these voter ID laws had been written by ALEC after the 2008 election, because we saw the model bill. We saw the bill that had ALEC's name on it.
Republicans say their intent is to eliminate voter fraud by requiring a photo ID from anyone who votes in Wisconsin.
They have advanced these model bills on voter identification by creating this lie that somehow people impersonating people at the polls.
Republicans say this will cut down on documented election fraud in the state.
It's only when you begin to understand that, in fact, voter fraud is an incredibly small problem in American elections, then you begin to realize that all of these laws were passed for an entirely different reason. It had nothing to do with voter fraud. It was all about trying to prevent Democratic-leaning voters from being able to cast a ballot.
Instead of trying to reach out to minority voters, they said, no, now that we've gerrymandered the districts, we're going to go after and suppress those voting rights. Those bills would have never been passed but for the gerrymandering that took place.
In the 90s, North Carolina was actually really progressive when it came to voting rights. I'm a North Carolinian, and lots of my family were the people that gained the ability to vote. They liked being able to register at license offices. They liked early voting. They love what's known as souls to the polls, which is early voting on Sunday. I've talked to people who've had that sense of joy, who've had for the first time in their lives that sense of belongingness.
The process opened up, more people were voting, and percentage-wise, African-American registration levels became more at parity with whites. And we turn to a strict new voter ID law in North Carolina, which is putting a spotlight on the broader national fight over when and where people can cast ballots.
What the new North Carolina voting law did was it rolled back almost every single one of those new provisions that had been created to add more black people to the electorate.
It didn't just include strict voter ID, but it cut early voting, it eliminated same-day voter registration, it eliminated out-of-precinct voting, it even eliminated Citizens Awareness Month, which the state of North Carolina ran to encourage people to register to vote.
It was all about suppressing African-American vote in order to give Republicans an extra 1 to 3%, which is the margin of victory in all of our competitive races. So even though gerrymandering has reduced the number of competitive races to only about 10%, they wanted to reduce it even more.
Ain't gonna let no extremists turn me around, turn me around, turn me around.
I've interviewed people who say now they have lost that pride, they've lost that sense of belonging. And it's a lot deeper than just the nuts and bolts of a partisan advantage.
There was a client that I represented. She was born at home with a midwife, didn't have a birth certificate, couldn't get an ID. She went to vote in person and she was turned away. It's humiliating. When you go and say, I'm a citizen, I have the right to vote, I would like to vote, and everyone else around you is voting, and they turn you away and say, no, you can't vote. It is humiliating.
Republicans see their time running out when it comes to the demographics. They see that the country is getting less white, more educated, and overall just more diverse.
What they have come up with is a plan to try and stem that tide. It starts with gerrymandering. It starts with drawing lines that give them the ability to win all of these districts. The second part of this process is voter suppression tactics designed to make it harder for Democrats and minorities to exercise the right to vote.
It's not a bunch of disparate parts. It's not like one voter suppression law here, one gerrymandering law here. This is part of a concerted national strategy by the Republican Party that's being undertaken all across the country, including in so many important swing states.
We battled to get voter ID on the ballot for the November 16 election. How many of your listeners really honestly are sure that President Trump was going to win Wisconsin if we didn't have voter ID to keep Wisconsin's elections clean and honest?
I absolutely think you can draw a line between the voter suppression efforts and the gerrymandering efforts and election results. We are seeing efforts to undermine the very core values of American democracy. Nothing is more fundamental in America than having the right to vote and having the right to representation. And those two core values have been undermined by this new assault on democracy.
Good to see you. How are you?
Hello. Congratulations on launching your campaign. That's very exciting. Hey, Marilyn, good to see you.
I just want to be sure that everybody gets to know Don Winter, who hasn't been to one of these meetings before. These are all your fellow plaintiffs, Don. Emily Bunning, Janet Mitchell. That's a lawyer.
Well, one question I have too about this election, about the Supreme Court. I've never met
Hello. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
That's Ruth. That's Nick. Annabelle. You know the names, I'm sure. Peter Earl.
We did meet through our involvement in this field. Our relationship just sort of fueled the lawsuit, but then at the same time, the lawsuit, it's sort of a mutually reinforcing circle.
Maybe coming from abroad, I have less of a sense of the status quo. So when I see something like the fact that legislators are allowed to draw their own district lines, I'm more easily able to say, well, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Can we sit out there so we can look at maps? I brought all the maps on the wall. I thought it might be useful to hear from all of you about your districts, to understand what's wrong with your districts as they are. So maybe would all of you feel comfortable? We have the map at the moment. You're welcome to come up and point and tell me what you like and what you don't like and what you prefer.
We were taken out of our district and attached to a strongly Republican district. I really feel that our vote is a wash. No matter what I do or what we do as Democrats, we can't get a representative elected.
We're sort of in exile down in Grant County, and I have these two secure Republicans who do not bother with me.
This is the district now, and you can look like it goes up here a little bit. You can look at how crazy it is with all these different lines. But what's interesting to notice, here's the city of Portage. It goes around the city lines, the city of Portage. That's a Democratic city. It excludes it. It goes right around the city lines. Here's the city of Incumbents. This is a Democratic city. It goes right around the city lines and keeps it out. So they took the 4 largest municipalities and went right around the city lines. It's a very good example of gerrymandering.
The Whitford plaintiffs realized there was no legislative fix to gerrymandering. Democrats were never going to be able to win enough seats under the gerrymandered maps to have any sort of impact. So they had to attack this in the courts, and they had to attack it in an innovative way.
If you are on the side that you say gerrymandering isn't unconstitutional, but when they
But no federal court had ever outlawed partisan gerrymandering before. And to succeed, the Whitford plaintiffs had to show that Republicans deliberately intended to deprive Democrats of representation.
It requires a special justification.
We're trying to figure out how are we going to get a case before the court that could once and for all resolve this problem. And we saw an avenue here. We immediately demanded that Republicans in the Wisconsin state legislature give us all of the documents from the secret mapping room related to the redistricting process. All the emails, all the iterations of the maps. And they responded to us that, no, you don't get this information. This information is privileged. The court said, no, you have to give them these documents. You're required to produce this information. This is not something you can hide from the public.
We knew that they weren't being completely forthcoming in all of the information they were providing to us. There were some spreadsheets that were created by the map makers, but we noticed that for some reason, we didn't have any spreadsheets in April or in May, or I think June also of 2011. And so we hired a computer forensic expert to look through the hard drives to see if he could come up with any spreadsheets from that time frame where they were missing.
The first thing that struck me is one of the external hard drives had screws on the bottom that had a number of scratches. This led me to believe that someone had disassembled this external hard drive. I also determined that a piece of commercial wiping software had been downloaded and executed. And in one hard drive, we identified almost 1 million deleted files. Someone did not want us to see what had been on those hard drives.
Mark was able to recover dozens of spreadsheets. And these spreadsheets turned out to be what we would see as smoking gun evidence in the case.
The spreadsheets told a story about how these maps were being drawn and how these were different scenarios that were being played out. It was as though they were testing.
You look at each successive spreadsheet and you can see the maps getting more and more biased. They started at 49 seats at their basic map, and they go up to 52 seats and 55 seats and 57 seats and 58 seats and 59 seats.
What they were doing is they're reducing the number of competitive seats. They got pretty quickly to 59 seats for themselves. I think there were 4 or 5 iterations in the map at 59.
Then they take the 59-seat map and they continue to tweak it, subjecting it to this analysis to say, well, what if the Democrats do really well? What if our candidates lose the argument with the voters? On that final map, even under the scenario of the Democrats winning the vote by the biggest margin they've ever won in modern Wisconsin history, the Republicans would still get 59 seats minimum in the state assembly. That's an astonishing manipulation of democracy.
I mean, think about it for a second. I mean, people elect their representatives, and representatives are accountable to the people who elect them. And but if you do this, if you're able to gerrymander effectively and egregiously and durably for an entire 10-year period, there's no accountability. They can do whatever the hell they want, and that is what they have been doing in Wisconsin.
Good morning. I'm Peter Earle, and I'm the lead trial lawyer in this lawsuit which we filed today. When one party gains control of all the levers of government and then stacks the deck in their favor to keep control, regardless of the will of the people, the very heart and soul of our democracy is weakened.
There had never been a successful opinion of any sort in this kind of a case. I'm always a pessimist when it comes to litigation. I thought that our odds of winning a trial were less than 50%.
Federal court rules today that Wisconsin state voting districts drawn up by Republicans are unconstitutional.
I remember when it came out immediately, I called Nick.
She just yelled out, you know, we won, we won.
I was like, you have to come right now. I'm going to buy champagne.
We were absolutely delighted to actually see a verdict in your favor, you know, for the first time in 30 years.
It was awesome.
This is the single biggest case for the future of our democracy since Citizens United. This may be the last time we have an opportunity to do something about partisan gerrymandering. If they lose, it's no holds barred.
We'd like to thank you all for joining us from near and far, crossing the country and crossing partisan lines to focus on solutions.
We are here at the Unrig the System Summit, and we are mostly just building connections.
The guy you were talking to said he'd introduce us to that funder.
We're all volunteers and we've never done this before, so we have a lot to learn from people.
Hey, Anna, what organization are you with?
I work for a creative. What's been really fun about it is that everybody knows about us already. We're kind of famous. I'm trying to be modest about that.
Congratulations. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
On the app, or?
I'm a fan.
Oh, great.
I'm the director in Wisconsin.
Oh, awesome. Can we connect?
Can we first take a selfie?
Yeah, please, please. That would be great.
Such amazing stuff, just into being all volunteer and engaging people, and it's really been amazing.
He's my lawyer.
Yeah, that's me.
I know. You got about half the signatures all by yourself.
I wish.
So, you got my text?
What was your text?
It's before you speak, Heather and I want to talk to you about how to find a way to get a money pitch in. You talk about where we're at. Just, I mean, I think it flows.
That's how we're starting, is where are you at?
Where you at? Where we're at, quite honestly, where we're at is we're waiting for the Board of Canvassers, and frankly, we're raising money.
I'm Katie Fahey. I'm with an organization called Voters Not Politicians.
One of the things that they're now having to figure out is how do we go from being a citizen signature gathering effort to a campaign? And how do we start to talk to a much broader universe of people, some of whom will be told by the opposition that this is a power grab and you should never vote for it.
What you guys did is incredibly impressive, but it's also the easy part.
Yeah.
The hard part is winning this thing. You guys are in for
Right. Oh my God, we know.
What about the Voters Not Politicians ballot proposal? If that gets on the ballot, you think it's going to pass, and does that cause a big problem for Republicans going forward?
I don't think it'll pass, but I also, when you talked in your intro about this is just some 27-year-old miraculously came up and an organization came together, I don't believe it. I believe when you peel behind it, you're going to see that that this has all been constructed by.
But you think it'll fail?
I do.
The opposition is being led by Robert LaBrant. LaBrant gets his start in politics working for the Chamber of Commerce, and he is the maestro of redistricting in Michigan.
As far as ballot questions are concerned, I've spent most of my summer trying to work out a legal strategy to get one of the ballot question proposals off the ballot.
LaBrant understood before anybody else just how crucial these redistricting fights could be.
Every 10 years we do redistricting in Michigan, and I've kind of made that a kind of specialization. Democrats tend to cluster in urban cities, and Republicans are kind of more evenly spread out. In drawing district lines based upon traditional redistricting criteria, Democrats have a lot of wasted votes. I don't think that's a direct result of Republican gerrymandering. It's just a fact of life.
The real intent of LaBrant and the other Republicans in Michigan was revealed in a series of emails exchanged between them during the redistricting process in 2011. The emails show that they gerrymandered the state intentionally.
So for everyone who doesn't know, we've gotten sued officially. They have filed a suit with the Court of Appeals saying that petition touches too many parts of the Constitution, and so it's a wholesale revision and not something that's appropriate for a ballot initiative. These are things
anytime you want to change something in Michigan, anytime you want to have a citizen-led effort to take back control over what's happening in state government, you better come with a lot of money, because there's going to be a lot of money on the opposition funding their lawyers to challenge everything.
This move is another one of those fundamental things that's wrong with our democracy. It's one of those things where, like, it's not really right. Like we have the right to petition our government and gather signatures and get it on the ballot, and then they're trying to do, like, say that we can't. Although we knew we were gonna get sued, it's not right that we are.
Hey everybody, I wanted to do an update, and normally I do this either on a Facebook Live or with an interview group or a number of things. You know, like an hour ago, I was feeling so good. Point of pride that I've always had is that we've done things the way that, like, you hope that they're done. I think that with this court case, it's made it feel really real that there's a lot of power out there that controls a lot of things that you don't get to be in control of, and that you can try and work as hard as you can, but you know, misplaced comma or a word can throw things out, and it feels really real right now. The pressure feels on, because what if something does happen? What if it's not possible for a group of people to band together and try as hard as they can, and what if it still doesn't matter? I don't want to disappoint anybody.
The U.S. Supreme Court will now decide whether the maps that determine who you vote for are constitutional.
The case on partisan gerrymandering has the potential to reshape American politics as we know it.
Hey, Peter.
Hello.
Good to see you guys.
Welcome.
Okay, we got the lawyers in now?
All right, lawyers.
With you. Stay.
One more. Look serious, like you're trying to save democracy.
Oh.
This is what democracy looks like.
It's a little weird to have so much of the world focusing on this. I got woken up at 6:30 with my dad calling me saying that he saw Nick, my co-counsel and husband, on Australian TV talking about the case. We've had a countdown on our whiteboard in Chicago. Somebody rang me and was like, oh, don't you have a case in the next few months? I was like, it's in 5 days. Now it's 4 days. Yeah, we're nearly there.
That's a big crack.
Yeah.
Liberals are all big crack right now.
So how about this? As this case illustrates, it's now possible to draw a district map that is so extremely and durably biased that democracy itself is gravely compromised.
Paul is the best possible person in America to do this. He's one of the country's best respected Supreme Court specialists who also has a particular expertise in election law and redistricting.
You look at the first election, you do sensitivity testing. What does the sensitivity testing have to show?
That for the plaintiff to win?
Yes.
That over a plausible range of outcomes.
I think everybody gets nervous before they argue in the Supreme Court. The most important thing is to be extremely well prepared and know what you're going to say first, because once you start talking, it's usually okay. What you want to do is get to the green light point, which is basically this court therefore has a choice. Either use the standards we've given you to limit this abusive practice or give a green light to the gerrymanderers to have at it.
I like have at it.
I do too. We got very close to winning the Veith case as it became known. We got 4 votes to say that the map was unconstitutional. There were 4 votes to say that the issue is a political question that shouldn't be in the courts at all. That was an opinion written by Justice Scalia.
The basic problem is that some degree of political motivation and effect in districting is not unconstitutional.
And then there was Justice Kennedy, who was in the middle.
Kennedy is telling the legal community and the social science community, I'm interested, I'm willing to tackle this undemocratic practice, but I need some assurance that there's a reliable, workable test. And so at the moment, fighting partisan gerrymandering in the courts means coming up with a standard that would be persuasive to Justice Kennedy.
We could not have done more to answer that call for a standard, to say this is the case, if there's any case, in which you have to draw the line and say it's unconstitutional and wrong.
There are a few times in your life when you get to particularly be my age, you look back and you say, there were times when I could have made a difference, and did I step up to the plate and do what I really needed to do and have the courage to do it? And the plaintiffs in this case stood up for what they believed in. We are at a real crossroads, and I think the window is going to close on whether or not we can really bring about this reform if we don't get it done in this case.
All eyes will be on the U.S. Supreme Court as it hears a Wisconsin case challenging the way the state's legislative districts were drawn.
The legal question is, can we even measure this? Should we get into it? Is this a political question that we should stay out of? And can we define what's extreme gerrymandering?
Rise up! Fight back! Rise up! Fight back! Rise up! Fight back!
It's a fixed system. It's a fixed system. That's what gerrymandering is all about. Congress would never, ever fix this problem because they have one interest and one interest only, and this is to stay in power.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, what the state is asking for here is a free pass to continue using an assembly map that is so extreme that it effectively nullifies democracy. If you let this go, in 2020, you're going to have a festival of copycat gerrymandering, the likes of which this country has never seen. The country is going to lose faith in democracy big time.
The whole point is you're taking these issues away from democracy and you're throwing them into the courts. Pursuant to, and it may be simply my educational background, but I can only describe as sociological gobbledygook.
What we know is they created 3 or 4 different maps. They weren't partisan enough. They created 3 or 4 more maps. They weren't partisan enough. Why isn't that enough to prove unconstitutional gerrymandering?
If you can stack a legislature in this way, the result is preordained what becomes of the precious right to vote.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Smith. I argued the case this morning for the plaintiffs from Wisconsin. We hope that the court will see its way clear to say this is not only a constitutional violation, it's a constitutional violation for which there is a meaningful judicial remedy.
Justice Kennedy with you on that?
One thing I don't do is come out in front of a bunch of cameras and predict Justice's votes, but I do think he understood our position and that he seems quite concerned about where the country is right now. Thank you, everybody.
There were some great lines. Did you think of them yesterday? Just the real zingers? Like the festival of gerrymandering, like the likes of which we have never seen.
But you heard Justice Sotomayor's comments, you know? I mean, you did this, and then you did this, and then you did this to really ratchet up the representation. That was all based on the spreadsheets that you'd recovered for us from the hard drives. So,
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed. We'll see.
I do want to say that you get to be a star of the day one day if you're a Supreme Court guy, but the case is made in the trenches, and this case was really made with all of you, the plaintiffs, the lawyers. If we didn't have that foundation, we wouldn't have been in the Supreme Court. So hope springs. We're gonna do it. Thank you, everybody.
We have brought together some of the best minds in the legal community, and we have studied so carefully the Supreme Court's jurisprudence on this question and built an evidentiary record that is so complete that, that I'm confident we're going to win. I'm confident we're going to win. I'll tell you, the future of our democracy depends on it.
Oh, here we go. Somebody says, is there any chance of the gerrymandering cases being decided today?
Of course there is. I mean, so I think we're mentally prepared for a win. Obviously, it's fantastic, right? But for we've talked over the loss like so many times that I think we're prepared if that happens. 9 o'clock sharp.
Okay, come on.
Last decision, Washington v. United States. What's Washington v. United States?
I don't know, but that means it's not us.
All right.
We can relax.
Okay, I bet it's next Monday.
I don't know why I'm so calm now I think about it. It's going to be very stressful if it comes. I just think it's not.
Because I had a very detailed dream that like Roberts announced the opinion, just like, you know, went after us on standing, like ruled against us on every single possible issue.
I think it's called a nightmare, Nick. Oh, second Minnesota Voters Alliance. Oh, Mansky. It is reversed and remanded.
Is that it?
Second and final opinion. Oh, yeah, we're done. Oh, not today.
That's a wrap.
Oh.
Maybe more coffee. I bet this is happening.
Ah, don't freak me out. But I'm excited, but I'm scared, but I'm excited.
Is Annabelle coming here if there's a decision, this now?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, we got a tail case! Oh, God! It's Gil from the Chief Justice! Holy shit! Oh, my God! Look! Shit! Quiet. Holy shit, it's ours. Oh, my God, I'm gonna be sick.
It is Roberts. Why is it Roberts?
What is it? What is it? Okay, it's here, it's here.
You know, the decision is long and complex, but a quick read of it tells me that essentially what the court has said is that these plaintiffs did not prove that they had standing and individualized harm to bring the case.
This morning, the Supreme Court not ruling on partisan gerrymandering, not putting forth a test as to when to determine there has been partisan gerrymandering, and really sort of punting this issue for another day.
No! You failed to demonstrate Article 3 standing. Really?
Damn them.
Like, that's your decision ground?
Now, the Supreme Court did say that the challengers can try again to see if they can overcome the legal obstacle of getting through the courthouse door, achieving standing, showing that they have a particular injury. And this case does go back to the lower courts.
Oh, wait, so it is vacated and remanded.
Oh, it is vacated and remanded?
Yeah, to go back. Let's see.
Oh, wait.
We might be still alive. It might be that, like, okay, you have to go back and technically, like, get some more plaintiffs with some more allegations.
So, did you win or lose?
So the court says that in order to pursue a claim like ours, you need to identify specific people, specific voters who live in cracked or packed districts. It's not enough to just assert exclusively a statewide harm or a statewide injury.
We have some plaintiffs ready to go. We are ready to amend our complaint and move forward. So it's not, I mean, it's not a disaster. It's just frustrating time-wise.
I can't tell. Are you disappointed? Are you not disappointed?
This is far from the worst scenario.
Yes. I mean, it's frustrating because we want to just win, right? Obviously, we want to just freaking win. But it's not a loss, right? I mean, we haven't lost. We're still going. We still have things to say. And it suggests we're going to eventually win, which is a good sign.
Yeah, I would say, too, that, like, you know, before today, my estimate of our odds of ultimately winning was below 50%.
Yeah.
Now I think it's above 50%, our odds of ultimately winning.
We continue to follow that bombshell announcement out of Washington. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy is retiring. The 81-year-old was nominated by President Reagan and served on the country's highest court for more than 30 years.
There's really no way to sugarcoat it. The retirement of Anthony Kennedy was terrible news for those people that wanted to see the court do something positive on gerrymandering. He was the only conservative justice that was at least open-minded about finding a solution on this issue, and now he's gone.
It is now obvious that the Supreme Court is not going to be our savior on partisan gerrymandering. We may have to be our own saviors. People are trying to take back these district lines that have been rigged against them. They want a fair playing field. The hope lies now at the state level. We are seeing around the country, Michigan, Utah, Colorado, Ohio, Missouri, there are citizen pathways moving forward. These are red states, these are blue states, these are purple states, these are states that went for Trump, these are states that went for Clinton. This is going to be the battlefield moving forward.
The Michigan Supreme Court is about to have a political hot mess dumped on its lap.
The Michigan Court of Appeals said the ballot question meets the legal requirements and the voters should decide in November.
But the challengers now plan to go to the state Supreme Court.
Hey!
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. You mind if I chat with you?
No, not at all.
All right, so how do you feel about today?
We feel good. You know, it's exciting to be here at the Hall of Justice. We had a really strong Court of Appeals opinion, 3-0 decision, saying our opposition's case was without merit, and we have every confidence that will remain on the ballot on November 6th. I remember distinctly when we were doing our town halls that one of the top questions I received was, isn't it impossible to do this? Like, aren't you gonna get challenged by the Supreme Court anyway? So we don't even have language yet. We haven't whatever. And the people of Michigan were already really worried about that because we consistently have seen opposition wanting to undermine this process.
Good morning. This is a special session of the Michigan Supreme Court to address an emergency election matter. Citizens protecting.
The scary part is that the Michigan Supreme Court is a political body. Our judges get nominated from political parties. 5 of them were nominated from the Republicans, and 2 of them came from the Democrat side. We know that the Michigan GOP is applying a lot of pressure to let them know how they would like them to rule.
The Constitution is very clear that the people are the source of all governmental power, and they have the ability to define how the government is going to be set up.
At the expense of the people having their right to elect representatives as they've done for 2 generations.
I don't believe this infringes that whatsoever, Your Honor.
It substitutes 13 citizens chosen at random across the state in place of a process in which 10 million people have a direct participation in the process by electing their representatives and senators. Is that not somewhat consequential?
I suppose the question is whether they decide that they want the legislature to have this power or a commission or to do it in some other fashion. All power in our state and in our nation is derived from the people, right?
Are there any further questions? We stand adjourned.
Yes, sounds great.
How you doing? Like a big day, eh?
Yeah.
Let's put here with the people in the
Okay,
beach
sounds
here.
good.
So this is really a fight against status quo and change?
I believe it is. Actually, I think it's a fight about whether the people of Michigan can be trusted to amend our own constitution or not. I feel like we were fairly heard and that we left it all on the table. And I think that what I heard was that our constitution is enshrined in letting the people of our state decide these issues. Thanks, guys.
Okay, someone has to start recording. Where is it? I am. Okay. Sit down. Sit down. Oh my God, Daddy, calm down. I'm recording. Proposal 2 is staying on the ballot. I was trying to before you did. We have an election to win. We know that our opposition now knows that we are an army and that we can apply pressure in ways that they can't. It is time to make it so that we get way over 2 million votes for voting yes, and so that people know what an independent citizens redistricting commission can mean for Michigan. It is time to knock some doors.
Good morning. I'm a volunteer from Voters Not Politicians. Hi, we're volunteers with Voters Not Politicians.
I want to congratulate the people of Michigan for the great choice and the great vote of the Supreme Court, so that the people move forward with the initiative and to have redistricting happening in Michigan. Because it's the voters versus the politicians. That's what this is all about. We got to go and vote for the voters, not the politicians.
That's awesome. What?
Proposal 2 is on the ballot. Katie Fahey is supporting the proposal. And of course, conservative Republican Jamie Rowe doesn't like it at all.
Democrats lose races in this state because they have bad candidates, not because we have bad lines. This is an unnecessary solution to a problem that doesn't exist. The people who draw the lines now are accountable to each and every one of us at the ballot box. The 13-member Star Chamber is going to be accountable to nobody.
Proposal 2, deal breaker number 1. Proposal 2 gives 13 new redistricting commissioners absolute authority in your Constitution. Proposal 2 lets 13 new redistricting commissioners vote themselves unlimited pay and unlimited perks. Convicted felons can be picked as commissioners. It's 3,200 words. Vote no on 2, or the joke's on you.
The thing that is super bothering me right now is that robocall they did from Katie urging them to vote no on Prop 2 and 3. I'm like, there's no way you just chose Katie out of a hat. Jerks. I'm tired.
You are looking live at Democracy in Action. We're seeing huge numbers of voters showing up today at the polls.
Are there door hangers for today, we got asked?
Right here.
Aren't those the same door hangers we have been using?
No, it says vote today.
Oh, it does? Oh, cute.
So much more than just candidates on the ballot today. We're taking a look at 3 proposals that could drastically change what it means to be a Michigan voter.
Proposal 2 would create an independent commission to draw new legislative and congressional districts after each census.
Got some info on Prop 2, ending gerrymandering in our state. Thank you for voting. Yeah.
It's coming down to the wire.
About an hour left to go before the polls close across the state of Michigan in these crucial midterm elections.
Thank you.
801.
801.
Okay.
That's it. There's nothing else we can do. We've done everything we can do.
It's almost 10 p.m. and you guys are, it's only 11-ish% reporting, but you're up by
feel good. I think I wish we were winning by more. Just because I'd feel a little better. But you know what? That's okay. Are you also preparing that we lost? Is there a good gift for that too? We lost! Oh!
Let's take a look now at some of the election results still coming in right now. Proposal 2 would change the way Michigan draws its state house, state senate, and congressional districts. And right now, the yes votes are well ahead.
Do they call the proposals later than they call candidates? Who calls it? Who are we waiting for?
I don't know. Now that some results are coming in, I'm like, yeah, okay. Okay, maybe. Who said it?
Where's a bunch of news articles?
No, Elizabeth, you believed in us before like almost anybody did. I just got told we called it. Way to fucking change the Michigan Constitution. How am I not crying? How are you guys? I cry all the time. You never cry. Come here. Okay, we should say something. I feel like we should say something. Hey guys, we won! Across our country who were trying to end gerrymandering too. We had Utah, Missouri, and Colorado. Missouri has been called, they have also officially ended gerrymandering. Heck yes! Utah is almost called 57% reporting for changing lives. In Colorado, it was at 71.4%. 71! This is not a moment, but a movement. The people of our country are sick of this, and if we don't come and say that enough is enough, then nothing's going to change. But we have proven that you can keep your integrity, you can make it so that you can invite anyone to the table, you can operate a campaign in a transparent way where we actually trust the people of our state to make decisions, and it ends up in a beautiful result that unites thousands of people and is about to unite millions of people. It mattered that you showed up, it mattered that you knocked doors, it mattered that you gathered signatures and stood in the rain and the cold and the heat. All of that mattered for generations of people. Your sacrifices have changed our Constitution. The Michigan State Constitution opens with all political power is inherent in the people. We are those people. This is our power. Let's go have an independent citizens redistricting commission that restores faith in democracy. Cheers.